Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, and we're going to talk about the danger of audience capture as a dungeon master for players who are seeking fun at your table. In my humble opinion, players who are seeking fun at your table are a danger to you. They are an emotional danger, an intellectual danger, and a spiritual danger to you as a person. And in my opinion, they can emotionally, intellectually, spiritually damage you. And so that's my humble opinion, okay? And I'm going to try to present evidence to you to convince you of it. All right. So let me paint this picture for you. Okay. So let's talk about audience capture. Audience capture is really fascinating. I did not know about this. I only learned this term about a month ago, and I learned it from Grim Jim. So Grim Jim is doing a great job with his channel. He's really trying to change and do some new and interesting things. He's a really interesting creator. I wish a lot of he does. I can't actually consume his actual content. He plays Dungeons and Dragons with people who don't wear their clothes, which I'm like, I don't know really why anybody would add that part. Like, maybe just keep your clothes on to play Dungeons and Dragons. It's really odd. But he has a YouTube channel. And fortunately, I think all that stuff is behind a paywall, which is good. Like, there should be an obstacle to that, in my humble opinion, right? So I'm kind of glad that less people see that, because I don't really think anybody should. It doesn't seem like a good idea to me. It seems like 100 different pitfalls, right? But his regular channel, he's a really brilliant guy, and he talks a lot about politics. He's actually trying to talk about politics less, but he's got a fascinating channel, right? So check him out, Grim Jim. I highly recommend him. The stuff where he has his clothes on, right? Okay. Yeah. All right. Let's keep moving. All right. So, basically, so Grim Jim, he talked about audience capture. What is audience capture? It's where you, slowly and often unwittingly replace parts of your identity to match what your audience is asking for, right? So this happens very much with YouTubers, right? So here's a perfect example, right? The DM's coach, right? Like, have you ever noticed? How do I start every video? I'm Scott Garibay, right? I don't have an audience capture part, right? I don't change who I am for you. I say who I am at the beginning of every single video, right? So, like, by the way, there's this, like, it's really fascinating. All these people have these problems, right? So here you go. Who has an audience capture problem? Professor Dungeon Master, right? Who is now Professor Direct Message, right? He didn't say at the beginning of each video, this is who I am. So guess what? He doesn't know who he is. And that's why he had to change his name, because he literally got pinched in audience capture, right? They're like, oh, you're Professor Dungeon Master. I expect that you love and really adore and have a measure of goodwill for Dungeons & Dragons. Now that he has no goodwill left for Dungeons & Dragons, he had to change his name to Professor Direct Message, right? Because he was audience captured, right? So he was unwittingly, slowly replacing parts of his own identity to serve up this false thing, because he doesn't understand true names. This is why I keep telling you, stay on Gary. Pay attention to Gary. He said, what is your true name? Do you know it? Can you control yourself if you don't even know your own true name? Pretty clear that Professor Dungeon Master doesn't know his true name, right? Because now he's Professor Direct Message, right? Audience capture is real. It is real, right? This part where, now here's the thing. This usually applies to YouTubers, right? This also can apply to actors. Famously, the Christian Bale, okay? He did a movie called The Mechanic. I watched it, right? And he literally, like, I think he lost like 50, 75 pounds for this role. And the reason why was he's supposed to be playing this man who literally couldn't eat because he had so much guilt, right? And so there's a lot of people that talk about Christian Bale in that he lost himself in that role, right? He had an audience capture issue in that role, right? So the issue is you can get audience capture, right? Here's the problem, okay? If you're here, you know, right? I think Dungeons & Dragons is... So there's two types of Dungeons & Dragons. I think Gary Gygax created deficiency cut Dungeons & Dragons, right? He specifically built Dungeons & Dragons never as a game, but as a human flourishment tool, specifically so that D&D would be a tool that every dungeon master, every D&D player would use to cut their deficiencies in half. But there's confusion today, right? There's people who believe that Dungeons & Dragons is a game, and they go and they sit down with the intention of cutting a goblin in half. So do you play goblin cut Dungeons & Dragons, or do you play deficiency cut Dungeons & Dragons, right? I play deficiency cut Dungeons & Dragons. And the players that sit at my table, right, they are seeking, they understand, right? And this causes friction, no question, right? They understand that there is an expectation that we are playing a very serious game of Dungeons & Dragons, and that identity, narrative, and language, we're going to explore those as deeply as we possibly can, right? And so when I push them in themes that are about identity, narrative, or language, they understand that, right? Whereas, look at the audience. So if you're playing, and that's deficiency cut Dungeons & Dragons, we push each other. We're trying to make each other understand our identities better, our own narratives better, and our own languages better, and try to create new languages that we can speak to the world, right? But what happens if you get stuck? If you get, and actually Sean Merwin talked about this. He said he was at he sat down with a group of players, and they said, we want no story, just the combat. Cut all the story out, right? Now, if he remained, and he did not remain with that group of players, right? He moved past them, and the reason why is he knew all they want is the fun. And so if you sit down with players who all they want is fun, you are going to be audience captured, right? Your emotions, the emotions you wish to invest in a meaningful, powerful story, are going to be lost, right? Your intellect, right? You trying to understand the world in a better way, in an infrastructural way, in a way that tells powerful narratives. If they just want the fun, you got to reduce your intellect, right? You have to make sure that you're hiding your intelligence, right? And your spirit, right? You're literally your spirit, okay? Dungeons & Dragons, it explores deeply themes of religion, deeply things of alignment, deeply themes of morality, right? It is a spiritual game, right? It's been there's never been an edition that didn't have pantheons. The gods are talked about, right? Obedience to gods are talked about. Defiance of gods are talked about. Paladins can lose if they don't, paladins and clerics are hobbled if their relationship to God, to their gods, their deities are harmed, right? You can learn spiritually about what it means to be a person of faith, what it means to uphold an oath, right? What it means to be evil, good, neutral, right? These are all what it means to be chaotic, what it means to be, lawful, right? These are powerful concepts, right? But if you get stuck with a bunch of players seeking fun, your spirit will shrivel. It will desiccate. Are you being audience captured by these, in my opinion, highly dangerous players who come to Dungeons & Dragons seeking fun, right? You can be audience captured. You can be shriveled. You can be made less, exactly like Professor Dungeon Master is going through right now, right? He's having a tough time. He's really having a tough time. When you change your name, trust and believe, you did that because there was a problem with your true name. Either you didn't know it, or somebody else has it and is using it to control you, right? And I think there was an issue of audience capture for Professor Dungeon Master, who is now Professor Direct Message. Make sure you do not get audience captured by, be careful. You do not want to get audience captured by a group of Dungeons & Dragons players who are seeking fun. You don't want to be shriveled and desiccated. Every single word of that is my humble opinion. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking, subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.